Hello and welcome to Storytelling.
I have decided to grant Wanda Anderson permission to use the house until the children have completed their high school education. On the house, Mr. Anderson will continue to make all of the payments, including the mortgage and the utility bills. In addition, she will be entitled to 50% of the value of the company that her husband owns. The vehicle that belongs to Miss Anderson will be retained by her, and Mr. Anderson will also continue to make payments for the vehicle. In addition, I am granting Mrs. Anderson 60% of all assets, which takes into account all of her bank accounts, investments, and retirement accounts. In addition, I have decided that Mrs. Anderson will have primary custody of the children. With Mr. Anderson having 2 consecutive weeks of visitation during the summer and every other weekend, the visitation process will be conducted in accordance with the standard protocols. Each child will receive a child support payment of $750 per month, for a total of $1,500 per month per child. In addition, I am adding maintenance for Mrs. Anderson in the amount of $2,000 per month. This is due to the fact that she has not worked outside the home for the past 5 years. If Mr. Anderson does not withdraw the petition, the divorce will be finalized within the next 90 days. Following that, the Honorable Judge Marie Matthews decided to put an end to the proceedings by banging her gavel hard. I uttered the single word that would lead to changes that would dominate the next several months of my life, and she was just beginning to stand when I did so. No. Judge Matthews froze in the middle of his stance. I'm surprised that her neck didn't break off when she turned her head to look at me because it happened so quickly. The expression of disbelief that she wore on her face was an extremely startling one. It seemed as if she was simply unable to comprehend the fact that someone had the audacity to utter that word in her presence. She retraced her steps and returned to her chair, where she had been sitting, in a controlled manner. It was as she moved that her expression shifted from one of shock to one of utter rage. After she had reclaimed her previous position, the icy gaze that she directed toward me was so intense that it could have easily caused water to freeze above the surface of the sun. If we were to say that she was angry, we would be grossly understating the situation. In a challenge, she asked, "Excuse me?" It's hard for me to say what exactly is difficult to comprehend. Is it the yen, or the o that you are having trouble with? I responded by saying, if you find that word to be so difficult to comprehend, I would be more than happy to provide you with a definition of it. Let me not be a fool. Exactly what is going to take place is not a mystery to me. In all honesty, I couldn't care less about it. I was actually making preparations for this. I knew that the following few minutes were going to be filled with a great deal of pleasure. I will give you 1 minute to apologize, or I will cite you for contempt of court. If that is the case, then at least you will have made one decision that is not incorrect today. I spoke up and said, I have nothing but contempt for this railroad that you are running here. As my attorney began to fumble through his briefcase, he was speaking to me in a harsh whisper. I couldn't help but wonder if he was looking for something different to gag me with. As she continued to bang her gavel, she sneered and said, in that case, let's see how much contempt you have after spending 30 days in jail. Unfortunately, I was unaware that we had been transported to Australia until it was too late. Due to the presence of a large number of kangaroos in this area, we must have been thought. As he was trying to put his hand over my mouth and almost yelling at me to be quiet, my attorney was becoming a very distracting presence in the room. 80 days. Would you like to pursue more? Having said that, I raised my right hand with the middle finger extended and said, you know, your auditioner, I truly believe that if you got laid every once in a while, you wouldn't be such a f after saying that. Why don't you take this and shove it up your dried up nowhere? I followed up by extending my left hand in a manner that was analogous to the way I extended my right hand. You will then be able to ride them to the climax. There is a possibility that this will turn you into a less man-hating psychotic than you already are. As far as I can tell, you are in more desperate need of a dick than any other woman in the history of the world. Sacred. There was a strong possibility that someone would be dialing 911 at that precise moment. I had a feeling that she was about to suffer a stroke or that her head was going to explode. I chose to believe that one of these two things was going to take place. In all honesty, I was taken aback by the fact that the smoke emanating from her ears was no longer visible. At first, I didn't believe that it was even possible for a person's face to turn that brilliant shade of red. I felt as though I was being bombarded with death rays from her eyes. Virginia, you are correct, she was enraged. 90 days, I swore to myself that her voice was of a satanic nature. The bailiffs were able to seize me at that precise moment, which was fortunate for my attorney. It was because of the pitiful expression that he wore on his face that I felt sorry for him. When I finally couldn't contain my laughter any longer and started laughing hysterically, everyone in the courtroom was taken aback. This most likely explains why I experienced visits from psychologists while I was incarcerated over the course of the subsequent couple of weeks. The fact that my attorney's law firm sent me a letter the following day informing me that they were terminating my role as a client did not come as a surprise to me. Since you were probably curious about what all of that was about, let me explain. It might be time to provide some background information. I introduce myself as Michael Naylen. Here I am, 31 years old at the moment. In the middle of the United States, I was born to a really nice couple who belonged to the middle class. Traditional values were instilled in me from a young age, and I was brought up with a strong sense of right and wrong. Those who were deserving of respect were respected by you. Yes, you did not cheat. There was significance in the fact that you made a commitment. Put in a lot of effort, be generous with what you have, and make sure that you are living up to your principles. Try to treat other people the way you would like to be treated yourself. Of course, the majority of people never give any thought to the opposite of that, which is to treat other people in the same manner that you regard them. Those who follow the Christian faith are taught to turn the other cheek. I am sorry to say that I have never been talented in that area. For as long as I can remember, I've always possessed what you might call an extreme stubborn streak. When you get that combined with my sense of justice, you can see that things can get pretty ugly at times. When I made the decision that someone had wronged me and devised a plan to deal with it, there was nothing that could stop me from following through with my plan. During my senior year of high school, there was a time when I regularly went out with Cheryl Haskins. This was the time when we had been going out for a couple of months at this point. During our conversation, we had a disagreement about something, but I can't even recall what the problem was. Regardless, we had a conversation, and then we parted ways. It was kind of understood that it was only temporary, and that we would apologize to each other a couple of days later and get back together. This is why I put that in quotation marks. The occurrence was not the first time that it had occurred. We would simply take advantage of the weekend to relax and then make up for it on Monday. On Saturday evening, I was walking by the theater when I saw my cousin Harold accompanying Cheryl into the theater. It was a very unfortunate coincidence. Here are two things: Harold and I were more like brothers than cousins. Here are two things. As far back as I can remember, we had been practically inseparable for as long as I could remember. We were the same age. During our childhood, we were neighbors because his family lived on the same block as mine. Furthermore, I was aware that he had feelings for Cheryl. He was aware that we had ended our relationship, but he was also aware that it was highly likely that we would get back together after the weekend. You are not going to treat each other in such a manner. For me, he was no longer alive after that point in time. I simply refused to acknowledge Cheryl's presence when she attempted to talk to me on Monday. I simply refused to talk to her. I was at church on Sunday when Harold approached me and made an attempt to talk to me. Without uttering a single word, I did nothing but stare at him. At the conclusion of his speech, I turned around and walked away from the situation. For the Sunday dinner that his family had come over, I paid no attention to him. He made an attempt to play video games with me, but I disengaged from the game and went to my room instead. Despite the fact that our parents made numerous attempts to persuade me to talk to him, I continually declined to do so. In spite of the fact that I had actually taken his girlfriend away from him a year earlier, I continued to refuse to have any kind of relationship with him. When he confronted me about stealing his girlfriend, I did, in fact, kick his behind, but that was the beginning of my punishment. It was years later when he sent me an invitation to his wedding, but I chose to ignore it. Each and every member of my extended family received an invitation to my wedding to Wanda, with the exception of him. Okay, so I'm a little bit of a jerk and I harbor a grudge against you. In the event that someone has wronged me, I do not forgive them unless it was a mistake that was made in good faith only. The actions that Harold and Cheryl took were carried out on purpose. Many of you are probably thinking that I am a complete and utter jerk right now. In the event that this is the case, allow me to aggravate you snowflakes even further. I am of the firm belief that if you are unable to serve the sentence, you should not commit the crime. If you are foolish and make a mistake, you ought to be made to bear the full weight of the consequences of your actions. Expect to lose your license for a period of time, pay higher insurance premiums, and be required to perform community service or whatever else may be involved if you are caught driving under the influence of alcohol. You are going to lose your job if your job depends on you being able to drive. I consider that to be an absurd tax. In the event that a young woman decides to spread her legs without any form of protection and subsequently becomes pregnant at the age of 18, her foolish tax is to be called mommy for the subsequent 18 years. In the event that a man chooses to bump bellies with his prom date and then knocks her up, he ought to be required to take responsibility for the child that he was partially responsible for creating. Consequences are a result of choices. This concept is known as personal responsibility. I choose not to be forced to pay for the foolishness of another person. During my time in high school, I put in a lot of effort, and as a result, I received pretty good grades. My college education was funded by a number of generous scholarships. While I was doing well with the ladies, I was also able to maintain my grades. My appearance was always on the more attractive side, and I made it a point to keep my health in good shape. It's true that I got into more than my fair share of fights during my time in high school due to the fact that I held certain personal beliefs. I had a greater number of victories than defeats. However, I was in good physical shape, and it appeared that the women found me attractive enough to be of interest to them. Both an economics degree and a minor in accounting were awarded to me upon graduation. After completing my Master of Business Administration degree, I went on to secure a respectable position at a large corporation, where I was able to earn a substantial amount of money. Because I was not married and did not have a lot of financial obligations, I started trading in the stock market. I discovered that I had a natural talent for that, and I ended up doing quite well in it. When I first met Wanda, I was working for a few months at the time. We were both at a party. After we had a good time together, I decided to ask her out on a date. She agreed, and events proceeded from that point on. I can't help but be impressed by her beauty. With all seriousness, how many men ever say that their girlfriend is but ugly? I can't help but laugh at that expression. They may find her to be unattractive to others, but they find her to be stunning in their eyes. In any case, I am able to assert that Wanda is stunning because she never fails to draw attention whenever we are out together, and each and every one of my friends has expressed their desire to move in with her in the event that we ever decide to end our relationship. As a matter of fact, a few of my lesbian friends have expressed their desire to turn her on in the event that she becomes available. My proposal was eventually accepted by her, and we went on to get married. It is probably important for me to point out that Wanda did attend college. I enjoy making jokes about the fact that she went on to earn her Mrs. degree. Despite the fact that she did not receive that, she did graduate with a degree in art history, which ensured that she was qualified for the position of barista at Starbucks. For the benefit of those who are perplexed, a woman who earns a Master of Resource Management degree is one who attends college with the intention of delaying the onset of adulthood for a few years and graduating with a husband who will be responsible for her for the rest of her life. Yes, I am a conceited and petty person. With that, we entered a state of marital bliss. 1 week prior to the wedding, she decided to leave her job and become a homemaker, settling into the role of Susie. The sexual life that we had was wonderful, and we purchased a nice house with 3 bedrooms. My performance at work was satisfactory, and I was also making a respectable amount of money by trading in the stock market. Considering that we were not really living an extravagant lifestyle, we were able to save a considerable amount of money. All of my bonuses were invested in our investments, and I also contributed the maximum amount possible to my 401k plan. I wanted to retire before I turned 40 and then spend the rest of my life doing whatever I wanted to do. Since I was so damn good at what I did, my employer rewarded me with substantial bonuses and promotions for my hard work. By that point, I was well on my way to climbing the corporate ladder. When I returned home from work on a Friday evening a few years after we had been married, I discovered Wanda dressed to the nines. As well as that, she was wearing a huge smile on her face. Get up quickly and switch clothes and take a shower. Tonight, Daddy, we are going to go out and start celebrating. Sacred. Do I have the right interpretation of what she just said? The news stunned me. We had been attempting to do this for a few months at this point, so it wasn't like this suddenly appeared out of nowhere. In spite of this, it came as a shock when she revealed that it had in fact taken place. As I swung her around in my arms and planted kisses all over her face, I took her in my arms and swung her around. On that particular evening, we lit up the town in anticipation of the fact that we would have to temporarily halt our celebrations due to her pregnancy and the subsequent birth of the baby. The subsequent few months were filled with happy times and preparations for the new life that we were going to bring into the world. The arrival of twins came as yet another surprise to us a few months later. The room contained 2 young girls of a certain age. When I finally got the chance to start spoiling them and having 2 little girls who were daddies, I couldn't wait to have them wrap their fingers around me. It was as if I had won the lottery. At long last, the day arrived. A few hours after our arrival at the hospital, our 2 little girls were born. We rushed to the hospital. These individuals were stunning, in good health, and possessed all of their fingers and toes. Due to the fact that they were twins, they were required to remain in the hospital for a couple of days longer than usual. However, everything was back to normal once we brought them home. We were greeted by both families who were present. Everyone had a lot of joy. My mother could be seen staring at them for what seemed like an eternity. It is my belief that she was overjoyed because I had at long last provided her with the grandchildren that she had been coveting. We were no longer the same people. I came to the conclusion that working for the large corporation was obstructing my time with my family to an excessive degree. Being in possession of a substantial amount of money, I made the decision to establish my own business. After spending some time playing the market and investing, I found that I was doing pretty well, so I made the decision to get the necessary licenses and start my own investment firm. The fact that I had already been assisting a few of my friends and relatives prompted me to discuss the possibility of them becoming official clients. Things got moving as a result of that. Once I opened my doors, I was able to acquire the portfolios of a number of former co-workers who had previously worked with me. Within a year, I had worked my way up to a respectable client list, and a number of those clients were talking to their friends about the possibility of moving over to me as well. When you are at the pinnacle of your field, the only way to travel is in the opposite direction. There was a celebration for the girl's 2nd birthday. We went all out and made it a full-fledged production. Despite the fact that they would never remember it, it was a celebration that they would be able to watch videos of when they were older, and it would be something that they would enjoy doing. Every member of the family, from both sides, was present. Everyone was having a wonderful time up until the point where I was about to leave the bedroom after using the master bathroom, which had been used by someone else. The bathroom in the hallway had been used. Just as I was about to make my way to the entrance, I overheard my mother having a conversation with her sister in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from," Mom said. "Have you asked Michael about it?" Aunt Mayan asked. "Oh God, no. I can't even imagine what would happen if he found out that they weren't his. He's so happy, that would probably kill him." I couldn't listen to the rest. I quietly retraced my steps back to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I had to think. They had to be mine. Surely someone in our families had blue eyes. My eyes were kind of a mud brown, and Wanda's were more hazel, I thought. I went through a mental picture of all my relatives. The only one I could think of that didn't have brown eyes was my cousin Mary. Her eyes were green, but that came from her father's side, and he wasn't a blood relative. I then began thinking about Wanda's family. I couldn't think of anyone on her side with blue eyes. After a while, I figured that I needed to calm down and rejoin the festivities before I was missed for too long. I somehow managed to fight down my feelings, put on a happy face, and return to the party. It was hell for the rest of the day. I did manage to act like everyone expected, but I was mentally making some plans on what I was going to do later. Eventually, things died down, and everyone left. Putting the girls to bed that night, I examined their features closely. Several features I could see from Wanda, others I didn't recognize. I found none that I could definitely say were from me. The next day, I was on my computer while Wanda took a nap with the girls. I ordered a few supplies to be delivered to my office. I used a company credit card so Wanda wouldn't see the invoice. I also did some research on local PI firms. The suspicion that Wanda had cheated on me almost 3 years ago was becoming overpowering. If she did cheat on me, then was she still cheating on me? I needed proof. A few days later, the items I ordered arrived. I had also met with and hired a company called Pro Investigations. I gave them all of the info on Wanda's cell phone, tablet, and laptop that they needed to hack in. I had also begun making some financial moves as well. If she wasn't cheating and the girls actually were mine, these moves wouldn't really make any difference. However, if what I thought was true, it would make all that money out of her reach. I'll be damned if I was going to pay for her to fool around, and I damned sure wasn't going to pay for someone else's kids. Sure, the girls are innocent victims here, but so am I. If she wants to fool around and get knocked up by someone else, let them pay for it. Nothing was set yet, but I was just waiting on the proof. It was 2 weeks later when I got the letter at the office. I had closed and locked my door before opening it. I cried for an hour when I found out that they were not mine. Deep down, I had already known that, but I had been hoping that I was wrong. My PI met with me the next day and gave me all the proof he had gotten. Her personal trainer at the gym was blonde-haired and blue-eyed. She was still seeing him a couple of days a week. She even took the girls to his apartment with her so he could interact with his daughters. Yeah, the audio confirmed that they both knew who the real sperm donor was. I had an appointment with a divorce lawyer the next afternoon. I'm not stupid, I already figured that the law was going to tie me to a table and drill my bottom without the benefit of lube. He gave me his advice, and I soundly rejected it. He explained how the law worked, I explained how I worked. He told me that it wasn't about being fair, it was about taking care of the kids. I agreed, she and her lover could take care of the kids without me or my money. I gave him my requirements and left. I think he was beginning to think that he probably should have rejected me as a client then. Little did he know, I had told him to prepare the documents but hold them until I called and let him know I was ready to file. I may have given him the mistaken impression that I was going to try and work things out. Okay, I effing lied through my teeth about that. It took 2 months. Everything was completed, and she hadn't even gotten the slightest whiff of a problem. Thank God for that drama class I took as my art elective during my junior year. I had finally gotten to the point where I had, at least on paper, 0 net income and 0 assets. Well, except the house and a beat-up Chevy pickup. The house still had a heavy mortgage on it, we had refinanced and took out the equity for some upgrades, so selling it probably wouldn't even cover the brokerage fees. My Lexus was actually owned by the company, not me personally. I had about $10,000 in cash hidden away to live on for the next couple of months. Wanda was really surprised when my cousin Howard and his wife Cheryl showed up that weekend. I explained that Howard and Cheryl had come to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago. After some serious discussions, they acknowledged that what they had done was wrong, they sincerely apologized, and I decided that it was time to let things go. Goddamn, you people are so gullible. Yes, we made up, it is absolutely true that Howard and Cheryl did come and see me in my office last week. Yes, they did apologize. Again, that is all very much true. I'm an honest man, I seriously am not lying about any of that. I actually did forgive them and welcome them back into my life. I may have neglected a couple of irrelevant facts, though. Coincidences, really? Cheryl's family has several members that are, well, let's just say, not above bending a few minor laws. Several of them are also quite large and have no compulsion against becoming involved in the occasional barroom brawl. Although I put absolutely no stock in rumors, it has been mentioned on more than a few occasions that 4 or 5 of them may possibly be enforcers for one of the local shadier groups of businessmen. Of course, that's just speculation by gossips who just don't like them. Even though this is completely irrelevant to this story, a couple of days before Howard and Cheryl came over to visit, there was a story on the news about a personal trainer at one of the local gyms who was mugged shortly after leaving work. He apparently was foolish enough to attempt to fight it out with the 5 muggers. Along with the criminals taking his wallet, car, and stripping him naked, they proceeded to beat the crap out of him, leaving him with a broken jaw, shattered nose, a few broken ribs, a broken arm, a dislocated kneecap, and both testicles ruptured. He will be in the hospital for a couple of weeks at least. The police really should do something about the crime in this town. Unfortunately, there are no suspects since all the attackers wore dark clothes, gloves, and ski masks. The doctors did state that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim would likely make a full recovery after reconstructive surgery to his face and significant physical therapy. It would be unlikely that he would be capable of engaging in sexual intercourse ever again. He would be finding out over the next couple of months that his car was taken to a chop shop and sold in pieces, his credit cards had been maxed out, his bank accounts were cleaned out, and the info in his wallet was used to steal his identity and put on the dark web. He would be fighting that for years to come. Oddly, Wanda was rather despondent and mopey for about a week or so after the mugging. My only guess is that she was also worried about the increasing crime rate in the area. I did offer to increase the security for the house for her, but that didn't seem to placate her too much. Monday morning, I called my lawyer and asked him to finish the paperwork and get it filed. I wanted her served on Friday late afternoon. He tried to talk me into some changes, but I was adamant. On Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. I met him at his office to finalize everything. He again warned me against my course of action. Thinking about it, I decided to humor him. I gave her the house, hell, I even threw in the investments. Of course, I stipulated that I would not pay a dime for anything else. If she wanted to keep the house, she could pay the mortgage and utilities for it. Oh, and there hadn't been a dime in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no problem giving her 100% of zero. What Wanda didn't realize was that I had been moving all my tools and equipment out of the garage. I had also been slowly moving things that I wanted to keep out of the house. Most of that was from my home office. Tools and larger stuff were being stored out on the ranch that Howard and Cheryl owned. Smaller stuff that wasn't really valuable was transferred to a small one-bedroom apartment in a complex owned by an offshore LLC. The owners of the LLC were surprisingly difficult to locate and verify. Friday morning finally came. I headed off to work as usual. I had Howard help me move my truck to the office a couple of days earlier. I dropped off my car, got into my pickup, and drove to the bank. Once at the bank, I cleaned out all the accounts, leaving $100 in checking and savings. I then went to the safety deposit box and cleaned that out as well. I drove over to the ranch and put all the cash and contents of the safety deposit box with my other possessions. I didn't want to take the chance of them finding a newly rented box at another bank and seizing it. I also didn't want anyone to trace a wire transfer either. Besides, I would probably need the cash later. You may be wondering why I was trusting Howard and Cheryl. It was rather simple. You see, the mortgage on their ranch was being held by a certain offshore LLC with rather murky ownership. Besides, even though we had our issues, he is still family. To us, you do not screw with family. The rest of the family takes things like that personally. There was a lot of happiness in the family when Howard and I finally made our peace. I made my way back to the house. It was late morning by this time. I pulled over a couple of blocks away and checked the GPS that I had installed on Wanda's car. Sure enough, she was at the mall, as expected. I hurried home and parked in the driveway. I had packed up the rest of my clothes and belongings over the past couple of days and set them in the garage. Tossing the few boxes in the truck, I went inside and grabbed the rest of my clothes from the closet and dresser. I didn't even bother packing them up, I just grabbed them by the armload, hangers, and all. It only took a couple of trips to toss them all inside the cab of the truck. I didn't even bother closing the garage door or the front door. My cell phone rang as I was leaving the house. It was Wanda. My guess is that her cards didn't work when she tried to check out with her purchases. I took one last look at the GPS signal and saw that it was moving in my direction. I just laughed, tossed my phone onto the table, and walked out the door. Minutes later, I was several blocks away. I arrived at my new apartment and transferred everything from my truck into the appropriate rooms. 3 beers later, and everything was put away. I had just sat back in my recliner when my new cell phone rang. There were only a couple of people who had this number, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was not one of them. "Hello," I answered. "She's been served." "You should have the video shortly," the voice said. "Okay, thank you," I responded before disconnecting. Sure enough, 15 minutes later I received the video over my email. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Unfortunately, I only had the video from her actually being served until she dropped to the floor like a sack of rocks. The man who served her checked to make sure that she wasn't actually injured, then turned and left. The video ended at that point. I would have liked to see her reaction once she actually began reading the divorce petition and realized that I had DNA as well as video evidence of her infidelity. From that point on, things moved with all the speed of a glacier. I got several phone calls. There were a few from my old office. She had called multiple times to try and talk to me. Apparently, she didn't believe them when they told her that I had resigned and hadn't worked there for the last 2 weeks. Then she actually showed up in person, demanding to see me. That didn't turn out well for her. It took the police being called to escort her off the property to get rid of her. Howard called a couple of times. She began harassing him to try to get a hold of me. I think she figured out that him suddenly showing up was just a bit too coincidental with my suddenly divorcing her. Restraining orders for both my former company and Howard were filed before she finally had to leave them alone. It was 2 weeks later before my lawyer finally contacted her to find out who her lawyer was. She hadn't gotten one yet. First off, she was quickly running out of money. Really, all she had was the cash in her purse and a total of $200 that I left in the bank accounts. She was starting to lean on her parents for support. I was just hanging out and relaxing. I wasn't going to start on any projects for a while because I was planning on not being available for a while, and I didn't want anything laying around that she could take from me. She finally did get a lawyer. Meetings were scheduled, but I declined to attend and simply gave my lawyer his instructions. My position was firm, not a single penny more. I understand that tempers flared at those meetings. It eventually came to arbitration. Those I had to attend, and they didn't go well. "Where's all the money?" "What money?" "All our money." "We don't have any money. We are flat broke. In fact, I'm living in the cheapest single-bedroom apartment that I could find." Seriously, I was just because it was cheap, since I happen to know the actual owner of the complex. All the investments, the checking, the savings, all gone. I made a really bad investment. Does investing in a cheating wife count? Lost it all. Well, that was true. I didn't know exactly where all those offshore banks actually kept their cash. "We're giving her the house with her name as the only one on the title," offered my lawyer. Sure, he could have been a bit more forceful on that. Instead, he sounded more like someone looking at a tornado-ravaged house and commenting that at least the rubble hadn't caught on fire. "It's mortgaged to the hilt, and there's no way I can possibly afford the monthly payments." Wanda screamed. It pretty much went downhill from there. Child support? Not my kids, not my problem. Spousal maintenance? Alimony for you fisting out there. No job, no income, no way. She's demanding 70% of the liquid assets. No assets. Look all you want, ain't nothing to be found. 50% of the business? Good luck with that one. 50% of the retirement? What part of the lost it all are you having trouble with? Yeah, arbitration failed spectacularly. That leads us to our day in court. As mentioned at the beginning, it was in front of the very dishonorable Judge Marie Matthews. She was the most feminist, man-hating family court judge in the history of the world. She actually seemed to be even harsher on men whose wives had cheated on them. Of course, if it was the man who cheated, he would usually need to be carried out of the courtroom after his balls were removed by her gavel. Yeah, I was screwed. So y'all are planning on leaving me a bunch of comments for being stupid enough to think that I could successfully convince them that there was no money. You would be wrong. I knew full well that they could simply look at the accounts from a couple of months ago and see how much was in there. I was not the least bit surprised when the judge used those numbers to calculate exactly how far the screws were going to be turned into me. The thing is, they had no way to access it. I needed the time to transfer it around through different banks and different accounts. I even went so far as to personally pull all the money out of one bank, then go to a few separate banks and deposit parts of the withdrawal into several other accounts. Of course, those accounts were in several different names. One of those rather shady businesses that Cheryl's family was involved with was a gag gift shop where you could buy fake IDs for entertainment purposes only. That was even printed on the ID cards. I had one that even said I was Jesus Christ. I loved it when I would pull a prank, and the victim would exclaim, "Jesus Christ." Then I would pull out my phony ID and agree with them. The fakes were really well done, and the only way to really know they were fake was because of the entertainment statement on the front. They usually cost about $50. For a few more zeros, they would accidentally leave off the entertainment warning on the front. I then electronically transferred the money into other accounts. Sure, there might be a way to track it down, but it would be extremely expensive and take months, if not years. By that time, I would be long gone. So here I was, back in front of the man-hating witch. It had been 60 days into my 90-day stay as a guest of the county. These short-term sentences were done in the county jail, not state prison. So, have you learned your lesson yet? She sneered. You mean the lesson about not marrying a cheating? I learned that one long before I was ever in your court. I was referring to your attitude in my court. The vein on her forehead was beginning to pop. I didn't think that was too good for her blood pressure. Can't say that I find anything wrong with my attitude while I was being railroaded in front of a bunch of kangaroos. I was seriously beginning to worry about her health. Her blood pressure must peg the meter during her doctor's visits. You are aware that I can extend your stay in jail, aren't you? And if that's the way you intend to be, I'm adding another 30 days. Now, I brought you here today to discuss why you haven't made your first 2 child support or maintenance payments to your ex-wife. And where is your lawyer? Odd. I was under the mistaken impression that you needed to be really smart to be a judge. Thank you for correcting me on that. Perhaps I can explain it to you so you can understand it. Sorry if it's still over your head, but the lowest I can go is so a 5th grader can comprehend it. Do try to keep up. I really was becoming concerned about her bench catching on fire from the flames she was snorting at that point. I was starting to think that she actually didn't like me. I am in jail. I have no access to any money. Since I have no access to any money, I am unable to send any money. Since it was your dumbass that put me there, perhaps you can explain why you are the reason that the cheating woman can't get the money that you were trying to steal from me to give to that 304. Now, did you get all that, or do I need to explain it to you slower? So, I was escorted back to my cell for another 90 days, 30 from my original sentence, 30 from her first tirade, and another 30 that I managed to catch at the end. To be honest, it really wasn't that bad. Sure, the food sucked, but I still ate it. I had a nice bed to sleep in and lots of free time to relax. I made good use of the weights and exercise machines. I didn't have many problems in there. First off, it didn't take too long for my court dramatics to become common knowledge inside the jail. That made me a few friends. Second, did I mention that Cheryl's family has a few connections that could be of help to someone on the inside? In fact, there was only one problem. It came from one of Wanda's less intelligent cousins. He had the wild idea that he could get arrested for something small, get sent to the jail for a week or so, and use the time to teach me a lesson. First off, literally the entire jail population knew exactly who he was before he even set foot inside the compound. From there, it didn't take much brain power to figure out what he was up to. He was spotted halfway across the yard. Unfortunately, one of the inmates ran into him as he was trying to catch an errant pass while tossing a football back and forth. I'm sure the elbow to his gut was purely accidental. Once he was able to stand up and brush himself off, he stupidly continued on his quest. After another 20 feet, he got binned in the side of his head by a basketball. The guy who made the bad pass apologized profusely. The elbow to the chin while he was being helped up was completely accidental. After shaking his head to clear the cobwebs, he again began his trek in my direction. There were 2 more incidents before he finally arrived at his destination. Since my back was turned, he thought that a sucker punch would be a good idea. Unfortunately, I was far from clueless. Before he even had time to bring his fist back, I got the signal, spun around, and drove my foot into his crotch as hard as I could. It was a clear 65-yard field goal. Since his misfortune from all the accidents seemed to finally catch up with him, he was taken to the infirmary. 2 days later, he refused to come out to the yard to exercise. He spent as much time as he could in his cell until he was released. And I'm back before the evil queen. Are you ready to apologize for your vile outburst in this courtroom? Really don't know what you are talking about. Whatever. Perhaps you can at least keep a civil tongue in your head and not extend your stay. So, I take it that another judge is taking over then? Boy, you are standing on my last raw nerve. Are you telling me that I should start stomping my feet now? I should probably see if they have a suggestion box around somewhere. I need to suggest that they have EMTs posted in the courtroom in case she actually has a stroke. Again, you have not paid a single child support or maintenance payment yet. You have also failed to pay the mortgage on the house or any of the utilities as I ordered. I thought that we went through this last time. I can't pay anything as long as I'm cooling my heels here in jail. Second, since you put me in jail, I can't work and make any money to pay anything. Third, they ain't my kids, so I don't know why I would pay anything for them. Fourth, my ex-wife is a cheating 304, and I don't think I should have to pay for her to screw around on my dime. If she wants to screw anything that moves, she should get a job and pay for her own sex life. Maybe she can start charging for it and make some money that way. And finally, you gave her half the business. She should have plenty of money from that. Your Honor, Wanda's lawyer piped up, we have been unable to take possession of my client's part of the business. It seems that Mr. Naylen sold his company to an overseas company approximately 2 months before he filed for divorce. At this time, we haven't even been able to determine who the actual owners are in order to contact them about the court order. Suddenly, a rather attractive woman stood up and asked to approach. Your Honor, I represent the board of directors for the firm that purchased the business in question. I have a motion here to dismiss the ruling giving Mrs. Naylen any part of a business formerly owned by her ex-husband. It is highly irregular to award one party any ownership of a business that is not party to the court case in question. Since the purchase was completed prior to the divorce being filed, this company has no bearing on this case. Therefore, we reject any claim of ownership in said business by Mrs. Naylen. But what about the money from the sale? Wanda asked. The transfer of ownership and payments were made overseas. I am not privy to that information, but my understanding is that the money from the purchase has never entered U.S. territory and is therefore not subject to U.S. laws. I'm afraid that you will have to take any claim on that money up with your ex-husband. That may need to take place in whichever country the money is located in. What country is that? My ex-wife's lawyer asked. The original transfer of funds was in Belgium, but my understanding is that the money was transferred somewhere else shortly after the sale. I have no idea where it was transferred to, the young woman replied. Your Honor, my ex's lawyer spoke up again, my client is desperate right now. The house is going into foreclosure because the mortgage hasn't been paid in 3 months. The utilities are about to be cut off. My client's parents were able to help a bit when this first began, but it is getting to be too much for them. My client has found a job, but it is waitressing at a local diner. It doesn't pay near enough to maintain the house. Mr. Naylen, you have 1 week to bring all the payments up to date. Oh sure, absolutely. Here, let me bend over and just pull the cash out of my crack. Oops, there isn't any there. Sorry, unfortunately I am physically unable to comply. Perhaps I haven't explained it clearly enough. I am in jail. I have no access to any money that you all think I have. I can't work because I'm in jail, so I can't get any cash that way either. You keep thinking that I have all this money laying around in my cell. Ask the guards, they check it every week. You keep ordering me to pay but don't give me the opportunity to do it. I admonished, Mr. Naylen. You can have your lawyer access your accounts and transfer the funds to your ex-wife. First off, as you can clearly see, I do not have a lawyer. Second, what accounts? You keep talking about these phantom accounts, but where are they? I keep trying to explain to you that I am dead broke, but you refuse to believe that. Third, even if these phantom accounts did exist somewhere, do you seriously think that I have the access information in my head? I would need access to my financial records to get bank account and routing numbers in order to access these phantom accounts. That's all moot anyway because there are no accounts. If you believe that these accounts somehow exist, would you be so kind as to show me the account info for them? What happened to all the money from your checking account, savings account, and investments then? I told you that last time. It was a couple of very bad investments. I took a chance and got wiped out. What about the money from the sale of your company? The company was in bad shape because of those investments. I had to sell it cheap and use the payments to cover expenses. There isn't any money left over. Mr. Naylen, do you actually think that this court believes that hogwash? I shrugged. I really don't care if you think I'm lying. Show me the account information where I'm hiding all that money. What I think is that she stole all the money and is trying to screw me over while she is screwing her boyfriends. That doesn't even make sense, shouted her lawyer. It makes as much sense as keeping me in jail where I have no access to money, than demanding that I make all of these payments you all want, I responded. Mr. Naylen, are you aware that I can keep you in jail until you pay? The judge asked. I just looked at her like she had just grown a third eye. Okay, I'll play along. Go ahead and keep me where I am unable to abide by your orders as you keep making demands that are simply impossible for me to accomplish. That sounds logical. Foreclosure on the house occurred 3 months after it had been purchased. Wanda was unable to pay the payments on her Lexus, which resulted in her losing the vehicle. Due to the fact that she was unable to afford an apartment for herself and the girls, she was now living with her childhood parents. She worked at the diner for a total of 30 hours per week. Those individuals were pleading with the judge to release me from custody so that I could begin making payments of some kind. Physical therapy was being performed on the lover boy, who had recently been discharged from the hospital. His efforts to improve his financial situation were fruitless, and he was spending hours each day trying to do so. One positive aspect was that there were no new credit card accounts being opened in his name. This was the only blessing. Because his credit rating had dropped to such a low level by this point, no one was willing to issue any more credit cards in his name. This is the reason why this occurred. Given that he had only a minimal amount of insurance coverage on his vehicle, he did not receive any benefits from that. As a result of the fact that he did not work at the gym on a full-time basis, he had personal health insurance with extremely difficult deductibles. He anticipated that it would take him many years to pay off all of his medical bills. The time had come for me to hire a lawyer. A deal had been struck between her and the judge that would allow me to be released from jail so that I could find work and start making payments. I had no choice but to hand over my passport because they were still under the impression that I was a flight risk and that I had money hidden away somewhere. To show that I was a good boy, I went to work at the Taco Bell in my neighborhood. I had moved in with Howard and Cheryl at this point, and we were all living at the ranch. There was a possibility that I had a stash of cash lying around, so I was being watched. It was obvious to me that I was aware of that, and I had no trouble determining who was observing me. Due to the fact that they were unable to enter the ranch property, they were forced to undertake their surveillance from the road. They were completely unaware of the fact that the majority of the cash was already in my possession. That is what I did for the subsequent 3 months. Through the use of a court order, Wanda was able to garnish my wages from my job. Since I was only making the minimum wage, she didn't get much money from me. I didn't care. During that time, I was working on putting the finishing touches on my plans. During the time that I was incarcerated, Howard had cleaned out my apartment. My extended family had received their share of everything that he had divided up. A few weeks earlier, my extended family had sent me a number of packages that had been shipped across the country. All of those packages had been sent to the same location, as that was the address. Cheryl's family had been over to visit at various times, and several members of her family had been there. There were even a few occasions when we shared a barbecue with them, in addition to the majority of my extended family. In the course of the day, the guests would go to the sheds located behind the house and bring some packages back to their vehicles. This was something that the surveillance system failed to notice. These packages were going to be repackaged and sent out for delivery over the course of the following couple of weeks. I either worked or stayed at home for the majority of my time. I never ventured out of the house. In the end, Taco Bell was forced to file a restraining order against Wanda because she was persistently coming into the restaurant to harass me about the money that I owed her. It reached a disruptive level. Certainly, they could have simply terminated my employment, but the manager's decision to do so was altered by a small amount of cash. When it was necessary for me to meet with my attorney, she came to the ranch to meet with me. Numerous meetings were held for us. Oh, you didn't know about my new attorney, did you? I certainly didn't. During that particular day in court, she was acting as a representative for the interests of the new owners of my former company. As soon as she finished that, I was able to hire her as my attorney. Additionally, she is a true shark. Whenever she is skinny dipping in the pool, I like to think of her as a barracuda. This is especially true when she is in the water. While I am sitting naked on the edge of the pool, she will suddenly attack me. She is sleek and lean. Also, she has an insatiable appetite for food. Giggle to what do you mean when you say that it is unethical for a lawyer to have sexual relations with their client? She is a lawyer, as I mentioned earlier, right? An attorney who is moral? I suppose you're joking, right? The belief held by lawyers is that morals are large paintings that are hung on walls, and that scruples are what you use to pay in Russia. I understand that you are probably curious about the money that I have. Undoubtedly, I did end up selling my company. I had no intention of selling it to myself. Wanda was not going to be given any opportunity to find any information that she could use to acquire any portion of the company, and I was not going to give her that chance. In addition to the fact that I wanted the money, I was getting rid of it. Due to the fact that the transaction took place outside of the United States and the funds were never brought into the United States, they were not subject to domestic laws. If I were to deposit any of the money into a bank in the United States, then and only then would Wanda be able to touch it. Considering the judgments that have been handed down against me, she has the right to claim it. To put it simply, that was not going to take place. It was a significant amount of money. In addition to that, I had money in my investment accounts that totaled somewhere around $10 million. I had approximately $200,000 in cash on hand, which included money from the safety deposit box, checking and savings accounts, and safes that contained cash of various kinds. Although I had used some of the cash that I had available for my plans, I still had approximately $150,000 available. I had no intention of taking any of the cash with me during my departure. As a result, the Saturday afternoon was absolutely stunning. When we got together with the extended family, we were having another barbecue. All of the preparations had been finished, and everything was in its proper place. The party was a fun time for everyone. During the grilling and smoking process, I assisted Howard. My attorney, Julia, was also present at the event. As the afternoon progressed, one of Cheryl's uncles approached me and introduced himself. He expressed his appreciation for the assistance that I had provided to Cheryl and Howard, and he was pleased that we had finally gotten back in touch. We engaged in conversation for a while, and then he took out an envelope and handed it to me. I handed it to Julia so that she could put it in her briefcase. Please accept my thanks. I was the one who made the announcement later on in the evening. I informed everyone that the person who held the lien on the ranch had declared that the mortgage on the ranch had been paid off and that Howard and Cheryl now have complete ownership of the ranch without any restrictions. That resulted in a tremendous amount of joy. On that particular evening, we danced our asses off. When the guests finally started to leave, it was already late in the evening. On account of the fact that she had a flight to catch the following morning, Julia was unable to stay the night. Along with a group of 6 other vehicles, she drove away. Surprisingly, her flight was departing from an airport in the state that was immediately adjacent to hers. When she arrived at the party, she had already packed everything and had it all in the car that she had rented to transport her. Instead of going to her rented apartment, she went straight to the airport. She never returned to her apartment. No one saw the man climbing out of the back of her car in the parking garage, and no one noticed the man walking casually 50 feet behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. Both of these events went unnoticed by anyone. Because he had turned over his passport to the court, Michael Naylen was unable to travel outside of the United States under any circumstances. There was never even a second glance given to the passport belonging to Mitchell Nelson. While they were traveling to Mexico City in first class, they were sitting next to each other and holding hands. No one even gave them a second glance. Julia Davis vanished without a trace from that location. On the other hand, Jamie Nelson accompanied Mitchell Nelson on their flight to Ecuador, which was a connecting flight. 2 days later, Greg and Samantha Cooper arrived at their hacienda, which was located on the coast of the Caribbean in Costa Rica. At this point, they were members of the Mile High Club on multiple accounts. Surprisingly, an old Chevrolet pickup truck that was similar to the one that had vanished from the ranch that Howard and Cheryl owned was waiting for them at the hacienda. Michael Naylen was the subject of a bench warrant that was issued roughly 2 weeks after the barbecue. 2 days after the barbecue, he had not shown up for work. He had not been present. We fired him because he did not show up or call. Due to the passage of time, his ex-wife has not been given any payments. At the time that Howard and Cheryl were brought before the court, a lawyer who was dressed in a skirt suit that cost $5,000 appeared alongside them. The argument that the couple had no responsibility toward their cousin was one that she was able to successfully argue. Simply put, he rented a room from them, and then one day he vanished without a trace. They even filed their own lawsuit against him for the back rent that they owed. The only piece of information that they were able to provide was that he left in his old pickup truck one afternoon and has not been seen or heard from since. Despite the fact that there was no evidence to the contrary, it was obvious that no one actually believed them. A small charter fishing boat was operated by Greg Cooper over the course of the subsequent several years. It was Samantha, his wife, who managed their modest cantina. They had a comfortable lifestyle in the nearby village. The hacienda that they owned was one of the larger ones and featured a number of luxuries. Occasionally, they had visitors stay with them for extended periods of time. It was not uncommon to find Harold and Cheryl, along with other members of Howard and Cheryl's family, present at the event. The life that Greg and Sam led was uncomplicated and enjoyable at the same time. Their love for one another was complete. The majority of their evenings were spent hosting guests in either the modest cantina or the extravagant hacienda that they owned. Both of them were quickly accepted into the small community due to the fact that they were both wealthy and pleasant to everyone around them. They were always willing to make a generous donation whenever there was a need in the community. Whenever Greg was not on his boat or in the cantina, he was constantly trading in the stock markets. This is something that should be brought to your attention. In addition to that, he assisted some of the locals with their financial matters and even set up accounts for them. Oh, and what about the ungrateful Judge Marie Matthews here? As a matter of fact, I laughed my *** off. Judge Matthews' wife, who was obviously a lesbian and a man-hating witch, was caught cheating on her with a man a few years after I had fled to Costa Rica. Of course, she was a lesbian. When the judge and her wife got married, she had adopted all 3 of her wife's children. Since they were married, Judge Matthews was obligated to pay child support, maintenance, and house payments for her now ex-wife. In addition, she was responsible for maintaining the house payments. Her ex-wife quickly moved her boyfriend into the house and continued to screw him, which added to the humiliation that she was already experiencing. For the most part, they behaved like a typical married couple whenever they were seen out in public, despite the fact that they had never actually tied the knot. I did hear a rumor that they had finally decided on a date for their wedding. Just 1 week after their youngest son receives his diploma from college, it will begin. Child support and maintenance payments are required to be made by Judge Matthews until either the child completes their college education or until her ex-wife remarries during that time period. It will be exactly 1 week after all of Judge Matthews' financial obligations to her ex-wife have been satisfied, which is an odd timing for the marriage. Hello, listeners. I would appreciate it if you could share your thoughts in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.